All right, and here we are with Coraline Ada. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here tonight.
Oh yeah, I'm excited about this. I've watched a couple of your streams, and it's really fascinating because what you do is you kind of talk to us while you're making music, and you know it's interesting because I mean, if you haven't made music, I guess you don't know anything about it, like me. It's like what goes into it, right?
Yeah.
And it's also to some extent kind of dissuasive for me to, like, you know, I've always wanted to make music, but then it looks like so much work.
That's the opposite effect I want. And at the beginning when I just started streaming, and I would not be streaming this stuff if it were not for the incredible Twitch community that you and I are part of. But when I first started, you know, it was interesting because talking about what I was doing kind of reminded me that, hey, you know, you kind of know some of this stuff, and you do have a like a depth of knowledge that maybe you haven't acknowledged before. So that's been super helpful. Another thing that's been really amazing about it, so I've been making music pretty much all my life, and I have never made music that is approachable. I have never made music that like people are like, yeah, I love that. I'll have the super fans, and I'll have people are like, what the hell is that? So I think showing the context and explaining not only how I'm doing something, but what I'm trying to achieve, gives people a way in. And you know, on one of my shows, when we were doing a cover of "Life Goes On" by The Damned, and I'm doing this with Randall from Eloquent, I spent 45 minutes on 10 seconds on the 10-second intro to the song. And I sent it to my dad, and he's like, why is that note held so long? And in the show, I was explaining, you know, this is a reference to an experimental classical composer named Skelty. I like went into why I was doing that. And I have a dear friend who plays bass with me sometime, and I was saying kind of the same thing to him, and he said, yeah, it sounds like Christo. And I was like, what do you mean? So Christo is that artist who famously like wrapped an island in saran wrap. He does these large scale art installations.
Those the flags and
And he said, Coraline, how do you think Christo makes money? He can't sell an island wrapped in saran wrap, right? So what he does is he documents every single part of the entire process, from receipts to sketches, permits, everything, photographic and video documentation on what he's doing, and that's what he sells.
Wow. Okay.
So what my friend said is the process is part of your art.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I was just talking with Martin Atkins last night, and you know, one of the things that we talked about is the value of stories.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so there's music, and then there's the story behind it. And not even just music, but anything, right? There's a story. Once you know the story behind something, it just becomes that much more valuable
and amazing, right? Often.
Yeah. So you're recording the story while you make it, and so I could see you later on doing, you know, putting it all together. I was originally thinking, you know, it's almost like watching, you know, I don't know if they even do this anymore, but you know, where you get the DVD and you can watch with the commentary from the director. Right. I always found that annoying because I was like, I want to watch the movie, not let somebody ramble on. But that's kind of a little bit like what, you know, like.
And I've even gotten to this point now. I built a website, No Signal Let Zone, to like collect all the collaborations and everything. And what I started doing is always linking to the latest work in progress. And I put the work in progress up on SoundCloud. And you know, it has a date stamp, it says WIP, and that's creating, you know, kind of a record, because I think a lot of people think, I guess this is true in some cases, but a lot of people think music is made by all the musicians getting in a studio and just
Mhm.
recording it.
Right.
But there's a lot to it. And there are a lot of decisions you make along the way when you're building a piece that, you go back and you're like, no, that doesn't work. Or my tendency is to like have too many layers.
Mhm.
And so like stripping them away, just finding what works.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is like throw it at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah. That actually would be, I think other artists would find that helpful to, so maybe you can license it out. Because, when Ogre did Tricks, it was all, supporter backed. And I was one of the supporters, and one of those that forked over $500 so I can get the mask.
Oh,
So I'm one of
wow.
it's either 5 or 10 people that have the Ogre mask.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But people were always complaining because it was taking so long, right? And it was because they were working on all those little decision things, right? And if people don't understand that, so I'm just thinking, if something like what you do could help other artists as well.
That's the whole idea, and that's something that's kind of the way I live my life. In kind of all the domains that I operate in, I'm trying to show other people that no matter what's going on, you have a chance and you have a shot. Sometimes it's like completely against the odds. But if you don't try it, if you don't believe that maybe you can, you never will.
Yeah.
It's and also it's fine to try and fail. I mean, I just released Not the Worst of A Little Fire Scarecrow a couple weeks ago.
I just bought
when
it.
I started making music again after I transitioned, it was 2016. And from 2016 to 2020, I wrote 65 songs and put out 8 albums. And a lot of it was crap. A lot of it was like real crap. But it was part of a journey. It was part of like developing a skill and developing a new sound. It was a journey. So at the end, I listened to everything and I relived everything that was happening in my life at all those different stages. And I boiled it down to 8 songs.
Oh, that sounds like you could make a documentary. Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back, last year I attended workshops on teaching entrepreneurship, because that's what I do. And there was one workshop I went to, which was how to create a series, like a web series. And their advice was just go out and record everything. It doesn't matter the quality, right? Then go through and pull out, organize it into chunks and then put it together in episode format, and then give it to someone to do post-production.
Yeah.
And then you have something to sell to Netflix or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you kind of have that, right? If you had recorded any of it as you were going through thinking about it.
Well, I definitely believe in the power and value of being vulnerable in public, but there's still some things you want to do in private.
Yeah. Well, that's where editing comes in, right? You don't have to put everything. But it would be really interesting to kind of see what it was that you kept, what you removed, why you kept it or why you removed it, even if it was like, just a couple of snippets of like, right, of those other 60 songs, right?
Yeah.
That would be interesting. As part of, since it was a journey and you can I think put it together as a journey.
I did try to do that with the songs that I selected. I picked songs that were of a time and place.
Okay.
And I did try to make that a little bit into a progression. It's not entirely linear, but I feel like it's representative of those different points in time. I made music. I started my first like real band after after high school stuff was when I got to college, and I was always a keyboard player. And and the music that I made, in retrospect, I didn't see it at the time, of course, but so much of the music that I made was coming from this place of deep sorrow, because I wasn't living my life and I wasn't allowed to be the person I wanted to be.
Right.
The last song I wrote before I transitioned is a song called Saint Cecilia. And it was a deliberate gift to myself. It was a goodbye to this and being hopeful for that. And it took years before I was able to listen to that song again. But so when I transitioned, I started my gender transition in 2013. So once that process had started, I didn't have that sorrow anymore.
Yeah.
And I honestly thought like I couldn't make music anymore. And there was a day in 2016. I was living in a shitty apartment. It was actually like overlooking the L and the highway. It was just awful. But I had some of my gear still. And back then I was smoking, a pretty heavy smoker. And I had a little balcony I could go out and sit on to smoke. And you know, from time to time, for a lot of people who do music, you have a little snippet of something running in your head. And it's like, yeah, okay. So I went out for my morning cigarette and I got a little snippet of a drum pattern. And I just kind of dismissed it. And I went about my work day. And after my work day, I went out and had another cigarette. And I'm like, that little drum part's still here. Like that's been playing in my head all day.
Yeah.
I'm like, fine, I'll write you down just so you can get out of my head. And 5 hours later, I had the start of a song.
Yeah. And that was the first piece that you had made in several years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that showed me, hey, you have new stories to tell, and you have a new creative center.
Yeah. You were saying that, you know, the sorrow is what drove you, you know, and that losing that, if you want to call it losing it, right, was, you know, losing your ability to make music. And it kind of reminds me, you know, of, you know, drug addiction and music, right, and art, right, or alcohol, right, that, you know, can you still make music if you're not under influence? And obviously people can still do that.
Yeah.
But there's that dependency.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The thing I like about music, and I listen to music I'm not limited in genres, I try not to be. The thing I love about music, the thing that attracts me to music is sincerity and storytelling. Those are the two things. And there's a lot of music that is like high quality, people love it, that is insincere.
Yeah.
And if I don't believe them, if I don't believe what they're saying, I don't want to listen to it.
Yeah. So that kind of gets into that one question that I always ask you, which is, what does music mean to you? So you can expand on that a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer in storytelling. I think it took me a long time to be in a position where I had a story that I was proud of telling, and that I was strong enough to be vulnerable in telling. And part of storytelling that I like, at least, is also world building. So one thing I really try to do with my music is create a sense of space, create a place, and every element is contributing something to the environment, the setting that the story is going through. And I learned that, frankly, from like Pink Floyd, from other musicians from when I was growing up who were doing albums, they were doing concepts.
Right.
You see that with Gary Newman and Two-Way Army. Even now, Gary Newman is still building worlds.
Yeah.
And that kind of world building as a vehicle for storytelling is what makes music meaningful to me. And of course, I like fun stuff, and I listen to stuff that isn't quite so deep. But the music that speaks to me is that combination of building a world and telling a compelling story within that world, and doing it sincerely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, you know, I haven't heard anybody really talk about it that way, you know, about it being storytelling. Usually people talk about just how it's like, it's the energy,
Yeah.
that gives them life kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is why and I still need to make an emote for this, but I've concluded that music is the force, because everybody
Yeah,
talks
that's
about how
fair.
it flows through everything. It's been around forever, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But yeah, storytelling, that's a different perspective. And you're right, there isn't a lot in the way of having a whole concept. I will have to, I've got to throw this out though. My friend, he has a band called Red Hot Rebellion. They're kind of a they were described as a cross between Motorhead and Spinal Tap. And so they did a concept album that also had a comic.
Oh, wow.
Right. So the story was that they were the second best band in the universe, because the first band was off on tour,
Yeah.
sent to Earth to because rock and roll just kind of sucked, and humans needed to be retaught what rock and roll
Yeah.
was like. And so that was really cool, and of course I get to be in the comic and
Yeah.
all
That's
that, which was
great.
fun. But that was that was the whole concept behind it. Was
And I have to say, musicians have been manipulated and exploited like forever.
Mhm.
But today, you have your Spotify's, you have stuff like that. I had a song from my first album actually that was featured on a Spotify playlist of trans musicians.
Hmm.
I got like 13,000 listens from it, made $3.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. And in the commoditization of music, which again is also part of our history, incentivizes people to make singles,
Mhm.
right? I am a strong believer in albums, because some stories that you want to tell, you
Mhm.
can't tell them in 4 minutes.
Right. And how many people make 12, 20-minute songs anymore?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I
um
absolutely owe that to like Pink Floyd, Claw 2,
yeah.
yeah, all those in Bowie did it,
Yeah.
and that's really inspiring to me.
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer in the album over the single. And if
Yeah.
there's a song I like, by like I'll hear Jeff Moyer play it or something like that, I don't get the song. I
Mhm.
get the album, and I usually get more than one of their albums.
Oh
And then
yeah.
I go to Wikipedia to find out like who they are and why they're doing this and what
Right.
they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
context. Back to context.
I never buy just singles. It
Yeah,
seems it just seems wrong.
yeah,
Right. The only time, back in the days of vinyl, that when I was collecting it, I've restarted now. I've got maybe a dozen vinyl. But back then, it's like the only reason I would buy a single was because I couldn't get the album, or I just
yeah,
wanted that other version in
yeah,
addition to the album.
yeah,
Right. That's, I wanted the 8-minute version of the song rather than
yeah, for
the
sure.
5-minute or 3-minute, one from the album. But I'll go back again to stories. Again, this was something that Martin really kind of hit on when he was talking about. He talked about this to me, but also in some of the interviews I watched of him before my interview. He talks about, and basic business kind of concept is that
Yeah,
you have, if you look at basic economics, the demand curve is sloping because there are some people that have a very low willingness to pay and some people have a very high willingness to pay, right? And so you need a variety of options for them, right?
mhm,
So he talks about, there are some people that will just buy a sticker for $1 and that's it. That's all they
yeah,
they want. But then there's also the guy that will pay $500 for the shirt that was worn during the show,
yeah,
right? And because that has a story, that's what makes it
mhm,
valuable, right? And that's something that you can't replicate, you can't do with Spotify or anything like that,
yeah,
right? And so that seems to be like, if you want to make money in music, that's how you have to go about it, is bring out the stories, whatever they might be, right? It might not be the song, it might be a
the
place or a
context, right?
time, or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And this goes back, reminds me of when I was talking with Daryl Hell, as a DJ in New York. And, he talked about growing up in Jersey, and learning about, like a lot of the kids that he grew up around were, into Grateful Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, he learned about how, they would collect cassettes, right? Because people can go into the shows, right, and record, and each one was a unique thing, right?
Yeah.
So each one was limited, and thus had value.
Yeah.
And so that's something that can be a way forward for artists to make more money. Spotify, can't think about that as a way of making money, but a way of maybe getting some exposure.
There's that Nick Cave line. I think about my friends who died of exposure, and I think of my friends who died from the lack of it.
Yeah. So you before we started, you had said you had a story, talking about stories, about your first keyboard. I think it was
my first synthesizer.
Yeah.
So I was like an 18-year-old goth kid who just got to college. I grew up in a town of 500 people. Okay. Ooh. Tiny town. And there were no punks and goths or any other subculture. There were the classic rock kids, the metal kids, and the rap kids, and that was it. And they weren't subcultures,
Yeah.
So when I got to college, that's when I was like, oh, hey, other people like, dress in black and like this certain kind of music. And I had a friend who took me under his wing, and like he had a Foot Locker full of CDs, and he just made me all these mixtapes. And I really like tried to soak in as much music as possible. So my first band, there was like a community board, and someone had put up a flyer that they were selling this Roland synthesizer, and I think they were selling it for like $200 or something like that. And so I got in touch with them, and this was a kid whose name was Slashtifer. And he had a band called Vegetation Information that was like this kind of jazz rock fusion kind of band, really interesting stuff. And they had a lot of theatrics on stage. So it was his synthesizer that he was selling. So I was poor as dirt. So I got in touch with him. I'm like, can I make payments? And he said, sure. I couldn't make the payments. So he came by my room one day. He's like, I got to take the synthesizer back. And I said, we have our first show on Saturday. Can you wait until after the show? And he's like, sure. So I was kind of an asshole growing up. And this first show was a demonstration of that, but also a demonstration of, like, I think this kind of punk spirit. So it was me on keyboards, a punk turned Deadhead on bass, and this guy named Buzz who was going to do the vocals. And we managed to like get ourselves in as an opening act for a cover band. For like a blues cover band or something. And so we go to this, it's just one of those little, college bars that has a stage. And so we get up there, and Buzz, who's doing the vocals, is standing in front of the audience with a black and white television in his hands. And John, the bass player, starts in with the bass riff for Peter Gunn. Dum 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 da da, and the crowd's like, "Oh, cool, we know that song, right?" And then I come in on the keyboard, and like we're building it up and kind of building a groove, and Buzz lets out a blood-curdling scream, and improvises this political rant Um, and John and I start introducing bad notes in what we're playing and just trying to like decay the structure and just like make it completely fall apart. And it gets like more and more and more intense. We're speeding up and the crowd's like, what the hell is going on here? And at the end of the song, Buzz goes like this and smashes the TV on stage. And we were up there for maybe 3 minutes. We take our shit and we go. And it turns out Slush Defer was at our show. And when we were packing up, he comes up, he's like, keep it.
Just like that performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So if the whole performance was 3 minutes?
About that, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
It was, it wasn't about a performance, it was about making a scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it sounds pretty cool to have witnessed that. I bet there's a recording.
Oh, I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah. But yeah, that's an interesting story. Yeah. So your first keyboard.
Yep.
And I see you have a few more behind you.
Yeah, I've got a few more.
Yeah. Do you still have that keyboard?
No, I lost it a long time
Lost
ago.
it.
I had that one, and I begged my girlfriend's parents a few years later to loan me the money for a Corgan One, which was my first digital synthesizer. But I had a lot of trouble when I was younger. I ended up having to pawn them both and not having the money to get them back out. And that's when I picked up guitar.
Oh, yeah.
But I eventually got them back. I bought a lot of gear last year, a lot of gear. But I don't have a lot of room for like physical synths and keyboards. So most of the synths I got are like this. They're tabletop.
Yeah,
they're fucking amazing. They're amazing. Yeah.
So you're on your show. You go about your process of making music. So for those who haven't heard anything that you've done, how would you describe you I know you say it's kind of all over the place, but
yeah. I would say kind of tying back to what I said before, I try to build a world. I try to create a sense of space, and I try to create tension. A lot of what I do will start out here and slowly build up until toward the end, you're like, oh my God, something is about to happen.
Yeah.
So I really take a lot of inspiration kind of in the way I put stuff together. First of all, from legendary Pink Dots, they're like an incredible influence on my sound, but also paying attention to what happens like in horror movie soundtracks, like what going quiet means.
Yeah.
And creating a sense of expectation, anticipation, even dread for what's coming next. So atmosphere, sense of place, and then I got to tell the story. And sometimes the story comes first. And sometimes I create a space and I'm like, I know what kind of story I want to tell that would fit in here.
Yeah.
I have a very visual understanding or way of modeling music that for a long time I thought everybody did. But I can see the pieces and I can see these swirls and eddies and currents, and I can see the rocks that everything's flowing around. I try to visually assemble a landscape and then throw out a story through it.
And one of the recent things you were using as a story is that interview from 83, right? Yeah, on Irish talk show, and apparently the guy is like, a major, legend as a talk show host.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I was going through this whole nostalgia kick during lockdown, and I looked up a bandmate that I had when I was living in Austin, and his name is Craig Chen, and he was the most innovative bass player I've ever worked with. So I found him, and he's been making music professionally, doing soundtrack work and stuff like that since I met him, or since that time. And I got in touch with him, and we ended up he ended up inviting me to collaborate. And he does noise and experimental and drone. So that was kind of a fun thing to get involved in. And one day he emails me, he's like, I think you should do this. And it was just a link to a site called Drone Day. And it was it's this global event celebrating drone tone experimental noise. And it's deliberately not organized. So like to sign up, you put in a URL and your city. No time, no nothing, no context. And then the day of the event, they published a page that was literally a list of cities. And you had to like click through and like, oh, this isn't going now. It was like kind of an exploratory kind of thing. Yeah. So the day before, it fell on a Saturday, which is the night that I usually do my show. So I went into it like, I don't always plan what I'm going to do, but I was like, okay, maybe I can use this kind of sound or something. But the day before, that Friday, completely by accident, I stumbled across this video that you were talking about. It's an interview from 1983 on Irish TV, and it was an attempt to sensationalize these subcultures there. And the host is very smug, and he introduces 4 young people, a punk, a goth, what I refer to as an iconoclast, and a mod. And he interviews each of them in turn, spends like maybe 3 or 4 minutes on each one. And the questions he's asking play to every stereotype. You know, he asked the punk, are you into violence? Are you into drugs? Right. And all of these kids, all 4 of these kids were so sincere. And just so, they were like, I'm just doing my thing. And, you know, we believe in this. I think this is unfair. But they weren't in his face. They weren't. Right. They were just kids. Right. They were just kids like who believed in something. Right.
They were Johnny Rotten.
They made him look so bad. I thought they made him look so bad. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, here's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I took the first interview with the punk kid, and I made samples. Just from the interview, just samples from the interview. And then I started putting it together live on my stream for my drone day participation. And that kind of, I liked the way it turned out. I thought it was really interesting. 2 hours I built it start to finish. I've done a lot of work on it since then, but that's where all the work happened, was live during those 2 hours. And that's the first time that I did feel like the process was like a documentary. The next day I went to make highlight reels. And I ended up sitting through the entire 2 hours and just watching it.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes I get hypnotized by my own work. So I thought it might be like that. And my daughter said, well, can I watch it with you? So we ended up watching together, and she's like, Mom, you made a documentary.
Yeah.
So I took all the pieces, and I don't expect anyone to watch me make noise for 2 hours. So I put up a page where it's the highlights that show the introduction of every instrument or every element. So there would be that kind of documentary sense of, you know, telling the story of how the song was made. And, you know, that's another form of storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so beyond that, I plan on doing a piece for each of the 4 kids. And then they had this psychologist at the end who's like, no, it's fine. So I was thinking about wrapping up with him.
Yeah. Well, I was watching a little bit of it earlier, and the thing that caught me instantly was that he talks about the gangs that are roaming across Ireland.
Yeah.
It's like, gangs? What? So, you know, he's putting, you know, a goth in the same context as or in the same group as Hell's Angels.
Skinheads. Yeah, he says like goths, punks, skinheads. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Like, no.
These things are not all the same.
Yeah. Well, even among skinheads there was variation. But yeah, I was reading a little bit about it, because of course, I wanted to know where they are today.
Yeah.
Right. So I found, some Reddits briefly on it, and, just quickly skimming over the comments, people were mixed between, the guy, the host, was he being a jerk, or was he being genuinely curious?
Oh no, he was being sensationalist.
Yeah. So the interesting thing so far, and I haven't gotten a lot of time to look into it, but I believe it's the iconoclast, as you described him.
Yeah.
Is now a male nurse in New York, who works with Nurses Without Borders, in connection with Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah.
And there's a video of him talking about what they do and why their work is important.
Yeah.
I only skimmed through it because I was running out of time, but
yeah.
You look in the comments, like, I came here for, the goth punk, et cetera video, but this is really cool too.
Yeah.
So it might be interesting to, have an epilogue kind of to it.
Well, I have to say, a secret, I don't want to say hope, but I did think to myself, like, how cool it would be if one of those kids heard what I was doing.
Yeah.
I think that would be an amazing connection to make.
Yeah. Well,
because, I'm not trying to tell my own story with what they're saying. I'm trying to tell their story, and doing so in a respectful way, not in a sensationalist way.
Yeah. And that reminds me a little bit of the story about Marcy, the one that sampled in a variety of songs about, doing drugs.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have to buy drugs. Right. That one.
Yeah.
And so I researched that, in that background. So the reason why a lot of people have it is because that was an interview done and released on album.
Oh, wow.
But that interview was based originally on a Newsweek article about, just kind of like the lost hippies in New York, something like that, right? And then the recording later on was more of a sensationalization kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that original author tracked her down. And so, after all of that, she moved to Hawaii.
Wow.
And I forgot what it was that she was doing there. But then she retired and moved back to Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Wow.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to say about the episode that I did, the punk, the Friday before, when I got the idea, I realized I knew what I wanted to end with. And there's that famous interview with Iggy Pop, where it's again one of these like kind of sensationalist kind of things, except Iggy Pop plays to it. And the interviewer he says, I've heard you don't like the term punk rock. And he looks at me, he's like, I don't have a problem with the term. I don't want to hear it coming out of someone's mouth. And then he ends with, like, the interviewer's like, your music is an expression of rage. And he says, no, what I do on stage has no meaning whatsoever. And I know what he meant by that. That's what I wanted to end with. I wanted to show, like, the logical extension of it. And I got dinged for copyright.
Oh, yeah.
And I have opinions about copyright. I believe that artists should absolutely have the copyright to their work, but usually they don't. And there's no commercial value remaining in an interview with Iggy Pop from 1984.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of, like, Negativland. If you remember Negativland in the late 80s and early 90s, they were fighting a system of copyright that wasn't about empowering artists and creators. That was absolutely about record companies making money.
Right.
And they're outlaws. That's outlaw music in a lot of ways. So I kind of think that maybe we need some copyright rebellion sometimes.
Yeah.
I release absolutely everything I do under a Creative Commons share alike non-commercial non-commercial, and that's everything from the videos of the shows all the way to the end product.
Yeah.
Because I see the stories that we're telling through music. That's part of our the richness of our cultures, and I don't want to tell somebody else, unless you give me money, you can't use this you can't remix this or use this in a different way to make something new.
Yeah.
That doesn't help anybody. So if you're interested in the whole thing with the exit interview, it is findable.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, and this is, going off on a wild tangent here, but I put up all of my teaching materials in Google Docs and make it open to everybody, even though, and I'll probably get in trouble for this if anybody watches it, the college that I work at years ago made a policy that syllabi are the copyright of the college.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, what? The college didn't make this, I made it.
Yeah.
Why does the college have a right to it? So I don't care. I want, if it can help people out, that's why, I put it out there. That's why I do these interviews, and why I'm, I stream them on Twitch, and I'm posting them on YouTube. I use the same thing for my speakers in class.
Yeah.
So I taught this summer. One of the classes I taught was women and minority-owned businesses, and so all of my speakers were typically women of color, either entrepreneurs or helping them. And the things they have to say are valuable, right? And so I want more people to know about it.
Yeah.
So I've been working on projects with a student and other students in the past about how can we take this information that we're gathering and accumulating and learning about in class and get it out there to actually help somebody, as opposed to just, it's something graded sitting in a file on my computer, right? So I'm always exploring like what's out there for, platforms for sharing information like that.
Yeah. And to come back to storytelling.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful things, one of the most powerful gifts you can give someone is the agency to own their story. And if the college owns the work that you're doing, or if the record company owns the rights to everything you've done, someone else is telling your story for you, and that is tragic. And so that's kind of the bar. That's kind of the bar for me. And one of the stories that I'm working on with a woman locally here is the story of Black-owned businesses in Charleston that have mostly been lost. So we're trying to, pull that all together. One, just to get recognition. Two, go ahead. I was going to say we're about to open up I forget exactly what it's called, the African American History Museum, or something along those lines here in Charleston. It's going to be opening up pretty soon. Very nice. I wanted to say with the Calamity Orchestra project, which is the first thing I started with when I started making music in the open, the concept behind Calamity Orchestra was take what's happening now, the social, political, cultural upheaval that we're seeing, and package it in like new wave post-punk, kind of a throwback sound. The first piece we did was called Cameras, and the idea with Cameras is that the protests that we saw last year, everything we saw when we're stuck inside our homes, like if you're not one of the people who's taking the street, everything we saw was phone cams, body cams, and news cameras. Everything we saw was mediated through cameras, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. And a friend of mine is a filmmaker, and he was going to do the video for us. And again, in the spirit of the commons and public contribution, I sent them to the Wikimedia site, where everything is free or licensed under Creative Commons for reuse. And they had an entire like Black Lives Matter protest page and all these other ones. I sent them all these links. And the first version of the video he comes back with, I watch it and I'm like, there are like two black faces. There are like two black folks in this entire video. What the hell?
Yeah.
And he said, Coraline, that's what's up there. And I thought about it. I put on my social justice hat and realized that for a lot of black folks, if their face is on video in an event like this, that can be literally life-threatening to them. So totally understood from a safety perspective, like why it was the case. But if it's not safe to tell the truth about history, we're doing something very, very wrong.
Right.
In 20 years, people are going to look at those exact pages to try and understand what was going on, and all they're going to see are the white folks.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because I think Black folks should have taken the risk, but we need to think very carefully about making it safe for people to tell their stories and creating a historical record that empowers other people to tell their stories.
Oh yeah, there's that comes up. It's been coming up a lot in various things that I've looked at. Is just this, particularly just anything that's historical. Yeah. Anything that we're looking at and whether we're looking at data or we're looking at news or we're looking at stories or whatever. It's almost always through the lens of the
privileged
European, the white European privileged lens, and then that informs everything else. And I won't get into like all the problems with AI and all that, and we can only learn,
or we could talk about the fact that Texas is fining teachers thousands of dollars for mentioning that maybe America is a bit racist, maybe. Yeah. So who's telling the stories and why?
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So there was kind of segue from this before we get like too dark in all the problems of America, which I'm happy to talk about, but there's another problem that of course both you and I experience, and that is mental health.
Yes.
So I have been kind of speaking up about it last couple of years in the college. I now put it in my syllabus.
Wow.
That I suffer from chronic depression. And, if I understand, if somebody's going through something, I'm, a safe person you can talk to.
Yeah.
And I've had so many students say, thank you, because all my other professors just say I'm crazy or I'm weak or, get over it or whatever. And it's like, so I chastise my colleagues at meetings about this, I put it explicit. I put it really in bold in my promotion letter. And of course I didn't get promoted, but that this is something. I think I put it in there somewhere. It's like, if nothing else comes of this, promotion application, can we put more emphasis on mental health? Yeah. And not just students, but our faculty too. Yeah. Right. So it's a really important topic to me. And I know it was something that you had mentioned that you'd want to talk about.
I've lived with pretty severe bipolar disorder and PTSD, a little sprinkling of anxiety to keep things interesting for a long time. And, when I transitioned, I very much wanted to be like an example of someone who can do this. But I remember I do a lot of mentoring for people who are early in their career in my field. And I remember this one time, there was a young woman who had just gotten hired on, and I happened to be in San Francisco at HQ, a company HQ, for some kind of event. And so she was like, Coraline, can I take half an hour of your time to get some advice? And of course I said, yeah. And so we ended up talking for about an hour. And back then I was a heavy smoker, like I said. And I said, I am so sorry, but I really need to take a cigarette break. I am happy to continue this conversation now or at another time. But I just really have to do it. And if you want to, you can come out with me. She said, sure, I'll follow you out. And I felt really embarrassed about like needing to take a cigarette break. So I explained to her, I was like, well, I'm bipolar. I have pretty severe bipolar. And about 80–90% of bipolar people use cigarettes as a way of self-medicating. Because nicotine can either like raise or lower your energy depending on how you smoke it. So I kind of explained that context as a, kind of like, I'm sorry, but,
Right.
And she lit up. She said, you live with bipolar too. And she talked about how you don't see successful people who have lived with a mental health disorder who talk about it. The only time you hear about mental health issues is when a white shooter, kills 17 people and like, oh, he had some, he suffered from depression. So everything we see about mental health is demonizing it. So she showed me that like it wasn't just enough to be open and transparent and visible as a transgender woman, but also as someone who lives with mental health issues. I'm pretty visible in my field and in my career, and I get a lot of abuse, harassment, doxing, even all the way to death threats. And everything they try to use against me is either the fact that I'm transgender or that I have mental health problems. So people are literally using this against me. But, if I can reach someone like that young woman and show her there's a way forward, this isn't a death sentence, all that shit is worth it.
Yeah.
It's 100% worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, I haven't gone through anything anywhere close to what you experience. But I started to share it because there was, I remember the one class, I can't remember the name of the student, but I remember the room, and I remember, the whole scenario, how he approached me at the end of class and all that, and talking about why, he wasn't doing well in the class. And like everything he described was like classic, symptoms of depression.
Yeah.
And so I told him, like, okay, I've suffered from this. That's the stuff you're talking about is exactly why I went to a doctor, 30 years ago, and got diagnosed with depression. And once I got on medication, it was a lot better. So he took the advice and went to, the clinic next day, and came back next week and said, thank you. I have been diagnosed with depression, and now I'm on trying out some medication. And it was it's kind of like, that's something I can do. It's one person, but it's a person. In
2012, I had a very significant mental health crisis related to like having to make a decision of, frankly, do I kill myself or do I attempt transition? I was like, if my life is really meaningless, why not at least try to live it the way I want to live it? And if all else fails, I'll take my life later. That's the kind of grim calculus I was doing. But I saw this that same year, Lana Wachowski made her first public appearance since her own gender transition. And the Wachowski sisters are very private people. They don't like doing media. So this was a big deal. The first time she was speaking in public, and she's brilliant. And I'll come back to something I'm honoring her with. At the end of the first Lana Wachowski in that talk, this was the Human Rights Campaign Visibility Award that they gave her. So she tells her story, and in a way that only Lana Wachowski can tell it. She was the first person, she was the first transgender woman I saw who I was like, oh, I can relate to her. Oh, we have something in common. She's one, like I saw a future there.
Yeah.
Which was absolutely transformatory. And toward the end of her talk, she said, she talked about like, because she and her sister are very private people, but she said, there's some things you do for yourself and there are some things you do for other people. And she did that for me, and I'm trying to pay it forward. Yeah. Randall and Stephen and we have this collaboration, Shapes with Two Edges, and kind of eloquent is like pure synth pop, crisp digital, everything very so, and I'm like a lot more organic and analog and kind of so bringing those two sounds together is going to be interesting. And we send each other song starters, and we leave space for each of us, like bring our own elements to it. And the latest thing that Randall sent me is a cover, the beginning of a cover of True Colors by Cyndi Lauper. And I was like, well, what can I do with this? Right? What can I do with this? So I decided what to do with it. Cyndi Lauper, it was written to be a pop single, but Cyndi Lauper, when she heard it, it resonated with her because she had lost a friend to AIDS. So her recording and the way she transformed and performed and put that song out was about that issue. So that was kind of a connection. So I'm actually taking samples from Lana Wachowski's speech that is so personally meaningful to me, and I'm going to be weaving them into that song to put it in a context that makes it part of my story too, that shares that aspect of it. It's not just a, hey, you're great. It's there's depth there, and there's meaning, and there's context there. And that's what I tried to do with everything I cover, is like relate it, find a way to relate it to my own story or the story I'm trying to tell. And that comes back to sincerity, right?
Yeah. And just for those that, are unfamiliar, Randall is also known as DJ Razor.
You're Rasker.
Or Rasker.
Yeah. I've asked him how to pronounce it, and he's like, either. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it says on his page Racer. So
yeah,
I say that. And the Wachowskis are, of course, known for
The Matrix. Right. And Cloud Atlas.
Yeah. And
went on to make Sense8, a short-lived series that was stunning.
Yeah. And I remember the news when it came out, that Lana was transgender, and it was like, that cool. I mean, it's great that she could do that.
Kind of what I was saying with, like, in retrospect, I saw that so much of the music I was making was about that. There was that subtext.
Yeah.
If you know about, like, if you know transgender women, trans people enough to understand that when you go back and watch The Matrix, there was a transgender subtext through that entire movie.
That's what I've heard, is that was kind of the whole underlying thing behind it, and which is really interesting. And
it may or may not have been intentional, but that part doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. So some heavy subjects, but yeah, definitely think that you know, more people need to hear about, right? Because you know, it's like your experience, you know, with the one person at the conference, right? That, you know, once you know, admit to something, you know, other people are like, oh, it's good to know I'm not alone, right? And so so, you know, that's one of the things that I've enjoyed, maybe not the right word, but appreciate about these interviews that I've done, because a lot of them have brought up issues, you know, that you know, the person I'm talking to has experienced. And once that airs and people hear about it, it's like, oh, it's good to know that, you know, I'm not alone. And so any way to be able to help with any of those kinds of issues is, you know, it's, you know, I'll use my privilege, you know, to get it out there if I can, right? So why not? I want to go back a little bit to music making. Actually, let's go back to the beginning. It's like, what got you started in terms of making music? I mean, why did you make music?
I was alone as a kid a lot. Had a pretty rough childhood, and things were pretty low tech back then. My dad had given me an open reel, like a reel-to-reel tape player, and I started trying to make my own radio shows, just to entertain myself, just to give me something to do. And that kind of, I did some dabbling in like sound collage. And then by the time I was a teenager, I was like, I think I want to do some music. I asked my parents to pay for lessons for me, and they were like, you're not going to be serious about it. You're not going to do it. It's going to be a waste of money. So I didn't even start really making music until I left home. And I feel like it felt like the right thing. Like when I started doing it, I was like, okay, this is one of the things I'm supposed to be doing. And I just, you know, with everything that I know how to do, I just taught myself. You know, I'm not a great guitar player. I may not even be a good guitar player. You know, my voice is shitty, you know, all this stuff. But like, I think the thing I'm really good at is getting an instrument to do what I want, to get the sound out of it that I want. I was just talking on Twitch the other day. I try to go for guitar lessons because one of my shameful secrets is I can't do bar chords. I can't do bar chords, which leads me to do some really fucked up fingerings to get chords, and it's like more interesting than a bar chord would have been. But I was feeling kind of self-conscious about that, so I went to get lessons. And the first thing the guy says is like, "Well, play me something." So I play him something, and he's like, "I can't teach you." I'm like, "What do you mean you can't teach me?" He said, "The way you're holding the guitar and the way you are approaching the guitar probably can't be unlearned at this point. I can't help you." So yeah, I just I was like, okay, I'll never be a great guitar player. I'm going to make it do what I wanted to do, though.
Right. And I responded because I was, you know, there that's where innovation comes from, right? You know, it's often with, you know, mistakes or not exactly knowing how to do something, because when you're taught, right, you work within the confines of what you know. Right. This is one of those. So one of the things I study is creativity, right? And so that's one of those. It's a boundary kind of thing for creativity. You know, there's on one end, you know, knowing nothing about something can allow you to discover, and on the other end, knowing everything about something can lead
Yeah.
you to. But it's that middle, just enough to not discover anything new. And so that's really interesting. But that's just the usefulness aspect of creativity. The other aspect that most people focus on is the novelty, and the novelty comes from that variation, right? The diversity in knowledge. And so, I always tell students, oversimplifying it, but creativity is the generation of novel and useful ideas, and what makes, or what an idea is, from knowledge, and knowledge comes from experience. Everybody has different experience, and therefore, if you were able to extract a full set of ideas out of somebody, all combinations of knowledge on someone's brain, no two people would have the exact same set.
Yeah.
Which is why, when people say, why didn't I think of that? Right? It's not because, you're stupid or you're not creative. It's just you weren't drawing on the same experience.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll think of things that other people are like, why didn't I think of that? So I always, encourage people to, one is, share their ideas. Right. But also that explains, one of the basic lessons in the managing diversity class that I teach, which is, they say that, more diverse teams lead to more creative solutions.
Yeah.
And this is exactly why. I remember I did this in a lecture in class, and afterwards, I have students write up a really short, summary. And the one student said, it literally quoted me, and it said, head explodes, like, wow.
I did a lot of research last year to be very deliberate about some of the musicians that I admire. I want to know how they approach songs. Because part of my nostalgia and part of the inspiration for Calamity Orchestra was earlier I was writing 3.5, 4-minute songs. They were compact and effective. And over time, I sort of stretched it out, and I wanted to learn to be a little bit more efficient with my storytelling. So
and the 3.5 was because that was what was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's somewhere in between. You gotta know how long the song wants to be. So I did a master class with Annie Clark, St. Vincent, whose guitar I have right here.
Oh, nice.
And Danny Elfman, and I looked into how Steely Dan put their albums together, and I wanted to learn how different creative people approached it. And a couple of things that really stood out to me. First of all, Annie Clark said, don't feel limited if you don't know theory. Theory is just a way for other people to talk about what you already know. So that really stuck out. But the other thing I wanted to mention, in the context of what you were saying about creativity, everybody has ideas every day. What you have to do is capture them without dismissing them,
right?
And make a decision about is that a good idea or not a good idea later, out of the moment. So Danny Elfman, his approach is he has notebooks full of 3 notes and notation or whatever like that. And when he wants to make something, he looks over all of these. Frankly, half of them are probably garbage ideas. And he's like, oh, that would be interesting with this one. So I keep a journal, and I just write down ideas. I don't write music. I don't write music notation. So I have a whole workflow on my laptop without using the mouse, without my fingers leaving the keyboard. With just a few keystrokes, I can bring up a sound studio and speak, hum, sing, whatever the idea is, save it, and then go back to what I was doing before. I don't have to say, okay, time to be creative, right? Or I don't have to say, oh, what's a good idea? We have good ideas all the time. We just don't value them. We're trained to dismiss them. So write down everything, capture everything, and see what happens with it later. Sometimes an idea takes, 20 years to be useful.
Exactly.
And you can't tell in the moment. but
Yeah.
you have to learn to listen to that little voice and learn to value what the little
Right.
voice is telling you, because you
And-
don't know what's going to be big. You don't know what's going to work.
Exactly. And that last one is key. You know, so I would go a little further, you know, in terms of, you know, judging whether or not an idea is good. Is the only way you're going to know that is to try it.
Yeah.
Right.
But
That's the
scary.
key.
We're taught our whole lives that everything we do has to be perfect, and it has to be, you know, a value to capitalists, or, you know, you have to be productive. And I fell into that. I fell so hard into that with my career. And that incentivizes not being curious.
Yeah.
I tweeted
Well,
about
that goes all the way back to first grade.
Yeah, I tweeted about the word rabbit holes. Like you hear people saying, "Oh, they went down a rabbit hole," or "I went down a rabbit hole," as if that's something bad. That's curiosity.
Yeah.
That's investing time in something without an explicit purpose. And that gives you a vocabulary of ideas that is rich. And that is what creativity is about, is getting that breadth, building that diverse vocabulary, and seeing what you can make of it.
Yeah, because you never know. You know, the famous story is the calligraphy class that what's his name? Steve Jobs took as a fake student, or, you know, or whatever. What, you know, he was like, it was something about, I don't know if he was attending or not attending, but whatever. It was something from that led him to an innovation in PC development, or computer development. Right?
Yeah.
So it's those kinds of things you never know. And so I always tell students, try different things, talk to different people, go different places, try something you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And so, the rabbit hole, you know, the exploration, we need to reward that. Right. And so this is, I can get on a soapbox about, you know, education, but we just go about it the wrong way terribly.
A friend was talking to me about the situationness and about the concept of drifting. And I don't know enough about the situationness ethos to speak to it. But what I got out of it is that there is value, and this goes against capitalism, it goes against productivity, it goes against all the ways that society rewards us or incentivizes us. There is tremendous value in doing something without a goal. Like, you don't have to sit down and make a song. You can sit down and explore a sound. You can sit down and explore an idea, even if it doesn't turn into something, even if it ends up being a garbage idea. The activity is its own value.
Right.
It doesn't have to turn into something. You know, you learn from the experience of working with something.
Yeah.
And you learn to play. And we don't value play anymore. We don't give ourselves permission to play.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's anti-capitalism, because good companies have figured that out.
Yeah.
Right. That's where innovation comes from. So they've tried implementing, you know, like, okay, 10% of your time is to do whatever you want, right? And see what comes of it. They're just very bad at managing that. You know, they're very good about talking about, you know, it's okay to take risks and all that, but they're very bad at implementing it.
Yeah.
Right. Risk is punished.
Yeah.
Right? Mistakes are punished. Right. And that's what needs to change, is we need
even if they're not, there are people who don't feel safe doing that.
Right.
And we need to create an environment where it's safe to fail.
Yes.
Where it's safe to not know what you're doing.
Yep.
And it's safe to, like, experiment and play.
Yeah.
Even if we don't end up rewarding it, we can at least make space for that, you know?
Yeah. I try to incorporate that in my classes. The way I've structured it, I grade based on how much work you do that's good enough.
Yeah.
Right. That's the grade. It's either good enough or it's not. And if it's not good enough, you redo it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not about, you know, trying to memorize some terms that you're going to forget next week.
Yeah.
It's a horrid way of teaching. That's not teaching at all. it pushes them to explore a little bit, to experiment, but most importantly, experience.
Yeah.
Right. We talk a lot in education about experiential learning, right, and how valuable it is. But overall, we're not very good at it.
Yeah.
Because it takes us changing what we've been doing for 20 years, which is lecturing, giving exams, grading them, and basing students on how well they are able to regurgitate some information.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
There's a talk I give. There's a talk I've given. It's one of my favorite talks, and I give a lot of talks, called Metaphors or Similes. Similes are like metaphors. And I talk about something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which has been criticized quite a bit, but I think it's useful. The idea behind the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is that the language you speak not only informs, but constrains your thinking. If the language you speak doesn't have a word for a concept, you probably aren't going to see it or identify it as a concept, or even be able to communicate about it. So the idea I took from that is, if you specialize, and I absolutely value specialization, but specialization only works in conjunction with generalists too.
Yep.
You want depth, you want breadth.
Exactly.
And if you want to be able to glue, if you want to be able to map, this thing happens over here, and it's kind of like what's happening over here, you have to have a vocabulary for it. And the only way you develop a vocabulary like that is by being curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I like being at a liberal arts school, even as a business professor, because students are essentially forced to have that breadth.
Yeah.
Right. And again, that's where the creative part comes from.
Yeah.
Right. You need that breadth and you need that depth. Otherwise, you're just a machine.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I want to like high five over to it's like there's just there's so much that I wish we could change. I do what I can to change it, but this hopefully everybody watching here, it gets that inspiration, gets that feeling that it gives themselves permission to do it. Someone in another interview said that. I forgot now who. I have to go back. I've done a lot of interviews now, so they're starting to blur. But somebody had mentioned an artist. I want to say it was like Steve Albini or someone like that. Mm-hmm. That said, just wrote a permission slip. I give you permission.
Yeah.
Right. And said, whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
You don't need permission. Here's your permission. Mm-hmm. I give it to you. Go do it.
Nice.
Right. Because sometimes people just need that.
Yeah.
So the more we can encourage people to just try things, the better. And I think that is something that's actually happened a little bit during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? Because people have had time.
Yeah. One of the things that I wouldn't say just that they had time, mm-hmm. but folks who have like family obligations, maybe they have young children. Mm-hmm. What I saw in like my circle is a lot of people like thinking like, what am I giving this company all these hours for? Like, what am I really doing? Mm-hmm. And starting to see like how precious their time really is. Yep. And a lot of people I know are stepping away. I did this too, stepping away from very ridiculous salaries. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who is dropped out of tech to focus on his beekeeping, mushroom growing, and electronics interests. And he's like, I'm just going to do this and try and make money for it. Yeah. And he's not going to make the salary he made before, but he's going to be doing something that is meaningful.
Yeah.
And
meaningful to him.
Yes, to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that happen so much over as a result of lockdown.
Yeah. This is something Martin and I were talking about last night was, this is something in the field of entrepreneurship. I remember going back to the beginning and you know, discussing what does success mean, right? You know, how do we measure success? Because, you know, to test a theory, we have to know whether or not, you know, there are success at the end, right?
Yeah.
Did it work the way it was supposed to? And we default too much to profit or growth. It's one of the two, right? Profit or growth, or both, right? As the success. But I remember, you know, it was normal that, at least when I was a PhD student, that we described success as whatever the entrepreneur wanted to accomplish.
Yeah.
But you can't capture that in a measure. That's the problem, right? So this is why I've been disillusioned with a lot of the research in my field. But yeah, so, you know, that's a perfect example of somebody realizing, you know, what is success to them, right? Is, you know, keeping the bees alive, right? You know, keeping the mushrooms and the electronics, and just, you know, making enough to survive, if that's, you know, their goal, or making enough to be able to give something away, or making enough to be able to, I don't know, live in a nice house. Whatever it is, right? I think that has another positive of this pandemic is it's helped people really rethink what it means to be successful, to be happy. Right. You know, and that app being, you know, part of the same thing, right? You know, sometimes, you know, success and happiness are two different things, right? They shouldn't be, right?
Well, I can say by every measure, I have failed as a musician. I've never made money. I make money from subs to my Twitch channel. I make more money in subs to my Twitch channel than I've literally ever made trying to sell music. Because like you're saying, the metric that I have, what I held up for success is thousands of people will love my music and all these things, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted people to get it. And I don't care if it's 10 people or 10,000 people. That part is irrelevant to me. If I know someone gets it, someone heard it, it meant something to them. It gave them a way of understanding maybe my story or another story I'm trying to tell. That's my success metric.
Do you have a mechanism for getting that, like to know that somebody got it?
They tell me.
I don't know.
They tell me, like,
well, they tell you.
You did last night in that exchange we were talking about. You call me a pioneer. No one's used that word for me before. Honestly, like, I do a lot of interviews in my career, which I don't want to talk about. I'm in the press all the fucking time. No one has ever talked to me about my music. So that is a metric. That is a measure of my success. The DJs and the folks in our Twitch community showing up and not just saying it's great that you're doing that, but they're saying, I like this. You know, I understand it and I like it. That's what I live for.
Well, what I would maybe just throw out as a suggestion, and I always throw out suggestions, and you can do what you want. Is having, you know, some way of just kind of collecting people's stories of your stories. You know, like you know, you think about, like, you go to a hotel and there's like a, you know, or a B&B kind of place, right? Where people can, you know, tell a little bit about their experience and their stay, right? But virtually, like,
there's something I do that I started doing same year I started my transition. Like I said, I face in my career, I'm a very divisive figure. So what I started doing was, whenever someone said something that, you know, Coraline said this thing and it meant so much to me for this reason, or I'm so thankful for Coraline for doing this, or thank you for doing this thing for me. I started saving them. I would take screenshots of them and just drop them into a folder. and I call it my kindnesses folder. It's on the desktop of every device I have. And as good things happen, like the little things that maybe some people will be like, kind of throw away, I capture all of them and I put them in this folder. And when I'm having trouble, when I'm feeling like maybe my work isn't being understood or not being valued, or I'm just having a rough time, I go through that kindnesses folder and I just look at it, and it's like, people, some people do get it. So I am doing good in the world, and I am appreciated. And it's the small things. It's the small things that that sustain you if you let them. So yeah.
It reminds me of a project. So I created this thing on campus a couple of years ago, like a change makers thing, right? It's like, how can we make change? And my boss at the time, gave me some stipulations, right? It had to be something that could carry on, among other things, cheap and doable within time period. So anyway, I assembled this group of students and challenged them to come up with something somehow related to sustainability that would leave like a permanent marker of some sort. And what they came up with was a Instagram campaign, hashtag got gratitude, where the idea was to just give a shout out to anyone that has, particularly focused with campus, but anyone that has just been helpful to them for some reason, right? That they're thankful for. Unfortunately, this came out like right at the end of spring semester, and everybody disappeared for the summer, and it kind of died. But the idea behind it, I think, is still really good.
And it goes both ways. Very often when I go through the kindnesses folder, and it's not like I'll visit it maybe 3 or 4 times a year, but sometimes there's something that really stands out where I'm like, yes, that person said this, and it was at a time when I really needed to hear it. There are people I've lost contact with. I meet and work with lots and lots and lots of people. It may have been like someone on Twitter or something like that I had never really had like a personal relationship with, or maybe we did at some point and we haven't talked in 6 years. But sometimes if one like really touches me, I will take that screenshot and I will send it to them, and I will say, thank you for this gift. Gratitude goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. Yeah. So I kind of just had a complete, absolutely different direction. It just kind of popped in my head.
Okay.
2 nights ago, I was talking with Boot Blacks. And one of the things that we talked about was pizza. And so I convinced them that they need to try thin crust pizza in Chicago. Not, deep dish, right? I mean, deep dish is fine and all that, but the everyday is thin crust, right? So they were looking for recommendations. So let me ask you, what is your favorite pizza place?
Oh, so I've lived in Chicago for over 20 years now, but this is not, it feels weird when I say that. I don't feel like a Chicago person. So I travel all over the world. I've been all over the place. Pizza is not my favorite food. What I go for wherever I travel is the diner. My food is breakfast food, for dinner. And so pizza I'm indifferent to. And like, I'm not a foodie. I don't have like you know, I love frozen pizza. I love like the fucking Jack's pepperoni pizza. I like that. And if
Yeah.
we're, you know, if I have people over, we'll get the, you know, we'll get the Chicago deep dish or whatever like that. I am indifferent to pizza. I'm kind of indifferent to food.
Okay.
So I can't really express a strong opinion about something like pizza because I don't feel culturally invested in it. Know what I mean?
Yeah, I can just see now that I've just set you up for some more hate mail.
Well, if I really want to generate some hate mail, I can say that I live in Chicago and I put ketchup on my hot dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think garden salads belong on hot dogs.
Well, let's not get you into too much trouble now.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll jump to my concluding question, which is, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? I have to say, hope sustains me. Hope has sustained me my entire life. The thing that gives me hope is seeing how I work a lot with people who are referred to as like from marginalized or underrepresented. I call them undervalued communities. And what gives me hope and what inspires me is people, you know, I've had a lot of privilege in my life, but I've also given up a lot of privilege in my life. Seeing people coming out of really adverse circumstances, coming out of, you know, their entire lives were set up for them to fail, and to see their hope, that gives me hope. When I see people who you know, who have struggled longer and harder and in different ways than I have, and they make something of it. And I don't mean like a rags to riches story or anything like that, but they find a way to make the lives that they're living valuable. That inspires me.
Yeah.
If you know, if they can do it, I can't complain.
Yeah.
So like my life work, I describe it as trying to give the gift of agency to other people. Trying to make room for other people to tell their stories.
Yeah.
And the stories they tell and what happens when they're able to tell their own stories. That's where my hope comes from.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see the value in that. Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of why I do these, right? Is giving people the chance to tell their stories, but and hopefully, you know, inspire more people to be able to share their stories as well. But yeah, it's really interesting to, you know, put it in the context of giving people their agency.
Yeah.
Well, partly because that's, you know, a very academic term, but but it's a word I've been hearing a lot more lately, I think.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That people are beginning to understand what that means.
Yeah.
You know, and that there are people, you know, out there like you helping people get their agency. So thank you for that, for the work you do. You know, and all the people you help. I'm sure I can speak for many people in thanking you for, you know, the things you do. It's it I get lost. I lost the words, right? It's inspirational. Even, you know, like you said, with people that maybe don't have much, or have, you know, everything going against them, and yet they still thrive. Not, you know, they're not rich or anything like by that measure, but this goes back to, you know, the success, right? What does it mean to be successful in life, to be a happy person, right? To be yourself. you know, so I'm always getting inspired by that. And I still have a lot to learn about it too, for myself even, but yeah, it's that's great. And a good note to end on.
Sure.
So when this airs, we will be rating into your show, and don't know yet what it is that you'll be doing,
Oh, I
but
don't
you'll be
need
making music.
Hopefully, whatever it is will be interesting.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. You know, I said in the beginning that it was somewhat dissuasive to, you know, see how much goes into that, but it's also very interesting to see, you know, what goes into it.
Mhm.
I think it just me, I'm somebody that likes to just plow through something and get it done, right?
Yeah.
So it's the amount of time that it takes to make, you know, music. Like for me, my musical dream is to just get on stage and beat the crap out of something for a while, you know.
Yeah.
You know, get up there with Test Department or Neubauten or something and just
Yeah.
bang on, you know, a piece of metal. But yeah, but it's it'll be interesting because won't be just music, there'll be a story.
Yeah. That's what I
So
try to do.
yeah, so thank you for taking the time to speak with me. It's been a lot of fun, great pleasure. And
I can't thank you enough for having me on. Like I said, no one talks to you about my music, and I'm going to take a screenshot right now
okay.
so I can put you in my kindnesses folder.
Oh, great. Yeah, cool. Um, well, thank you. With that, we will get ready to raid.